Today's facilitator is Todd Webb from the Federal Highway Administration Office of Civil Rights, and I'm going to turn it over to Todd.
Welcome to the FHWA ADA Virtual Peer Exchange on ADA Transition Plan Implementation. My name is Todd Webb, ADA Program Analyst from the FHWA Office of Civil Rights. I will be facilitating today's session. This is our fifth webinar in a series of 5 to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the passage of the ADA. This webinar series will highlight best practices and innovative approaches being used by state DOTs to implement their ADA transition plans. Today you will hear from James Beatty from the Missouri Department of Transportation and Tom Nickel and Jim Pappas from the Delaware Department of Transportation. Today's focus will explore the latest technologies and innovation approaches to transition plan implementation. In this webinar, we will hear examples of new technological advances available to help maximize impacts, and Knopp, FHWA's Associate Administrator for Operations, as our keynote speaker. Martin C. Knopp was appointed as the Associate Administrator for Operations in January 2017. In this capacity, he provides national leadership for the management and operation of the surface transportation system and is responsible for FHWA's efforts in the areas of congestion management, intelligent transportation, systems deployment, traffic operations, emergency management, and freight management and operations. Prior to this, Martin served as the Director of Field Services for the Northeast region, overseeing the corporate responsibilities of 13 Federal Aid Division offices in the Northeast that included 264 employees and over $8 billion in federal aid new funding annually. As one of 4 DFS leaders covering the federal aid across the country, he supervised division administrators and served as a field deputy for the executive director and a member of the agency's leadership team. Prior to the DFS role, Martin also served as a division administrator for both the Florida and the Puerto Rico federal aid divisions, and as the FHWA Resource Center's Operations Technical Service Team Leader. Martin began his FHWA career as a highway engineer trainee in 1989. He served in various positions in FHWA until he went to work at the Utah Department of Transportation as a Director of Intelligent Transportation Systems Division before rejoining Federal Highway. Martin graduated from Pennsylvania State University in 1989 with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering and is a licensed engineer in Utah. Please welcome Martin Knopp.
Thank you, Todd, and welcome to everyone. Good afternoon and good morning. And I know we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but that's probably in keeping with where we're at, celebrating 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. While we're not where everybody wants to be there yet, we're certainly working on getting the technology to work today. So it's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this webinar and celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. FHWA's Office of Civil Rights is hosting webinars to make this 30th anniversary, and today we are attending the last in the series of those 5 webinars. This one is focused on the importance of innovation and technology for transition plan implementation. A little ironic focusing on technology today and having a glitch or two. While I've mentioned our FHWA Office of Civil Rights, I just have to say that I think so highly of Associate Administrator Irene Rico and her talented staff. I admire their expertise and enthusiasm and greatly value the collaboration on civil rights topics in my own program areas of operations. And I hope all of you who are attending today have similar relationships among your offices in your organization. Since this landmark ADA legislation was passed, it has helped state and local governments make great strides in making the transportation system accessible to all citizens through the ADA transition plan. In the Office of Operations, we focus on the federal aid program supporting transportation system management and operation of the highway facilities. Among many initiatives, the office is responsible for FHWA's efforts in the areas of traffic operations, freight management and operations, and intelligent transportation systems deployment. FHWA co-leads a joint U.S. DOT Accessible Transportation Technologies Research Initiative, also known as ATRI. We co-lead with the Federal Transit Administration and the U.S. DOT's Intelligent Transportation Systems Joint Program Office, with support from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research, as well as other federal partners. ATRI is leading efforts to develop and implement transformative applications to improve mobility options, with research focusing on removing barriers to transportation for people with disabilities and funding for emerging technologies and creative service models. USDOT uses the complete trip concept for all travelers, especially those with disabilities, to get from their starting point to their destination spontaneously and independently. The goal being for people to be able to navigate sidewalks, intersections, transit facilities, rail stations, vehicles, and all other parts of the transportation network with ease and confidence, not just curb to curb and door to door, but point to point. In some instances, we researched the impacts of trending applications, as with the increase in decorative and aesthetic crosswalk treatments. We've kicked off a study that will examine, among other measures of effectiveness, how pedestrians with low vision perceive and interpret those aesthetic crosswalk treatments. Other times, we are looking to develop new applications. An example is Carnegie Mellon University, with funding from the ATRI program, developing a mobile smartphone application that enables pedestrians to communicate directly with signalized intersections. The application, called PedPal, combines emerging connected vehicle communication technology with a recently developed real-time adaptive traffic signal control system to provide for a safer and more efficient intersection crossing experience for pedestrians with disabilities. Researchers are now exploring deployment options. And I just want to make a personal aside here after last week's vote by the FCC commissioners to cut and gut the safety band, 5.9 gigahertz spectrum, that this has set us back, in my humble opinion, and I'm very discouraged. But all of us here are not people to give up, and we will find a way working forward through the options that are put at our disposal to apply technology to improve transportation safety for all users, especially those with disabilities. Now, this year, USDOT also launched an Inclusive Design Challenge focused on innovative design solutions to enable people with physical, sensory, and cognitive disabilities to use automated vehicles to access jobs, healthcare, and other critical destinations. USDOT research includes assessing automated wheelchair securement and human-machine interfaces to inform the development of goals and considerations related to the accessibility of automated vehicles. Today, we will hear about the latest approaches being used to collect inventory data on infrastructure that could further contribute to developing technologies and innovative approaches. We'll hear how Missouri and Delaware are using data for implementing transition plans that help maximize impact and increase accessibility. Now, finally, while today's theme is focused on innovations and technology, I encourage all of us to not forget the obvious. Sometimes, while we should be pursuing technology with all enthusiasm, sometimes simple solutions are equally important, and I learned that myself because we are all on a spectrum of disability in our lives, whether now or somewhere in our future. And I've just had a taste when I've had injured knees. And one time I was going to visit an office after a painful injured knee. I found the parking. I found the federal building in that state. I got my supplies, had my cane. I hobbled over, walked up the stairs, very painful, just to find a small note on the door of that federal building in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, that said visitors need to enter through the other side of the building. And so there's no way anyone could read that from the sidewalk, and that's simple solutions that we sometimes overlook. So today, let's go after improvements wherever we can, especially using technology to get us there. And I thank you for the opportunity to share some information about a few of the transportation operations related activities and research that are underway. Todd, I'll turn it back to you to make the next introduction.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for sharing that personal experience. That's something that will definitely impact all of us. Thank you. All right, so we have our first poll question up. And our first poll question is, what type of agency do you represent? FHWA, other federal agency, state DOT, other state agency, MPO or similar planning organization, municipal or county government, academic, consultant, other, no vote. So we'll just have a few minutes here. All right, that's our first poll question. Like a majority are from state DOTs, with municipal and county government to follow. All right, we are now going to hear from our first panelist, James Beatty. James Beatty is a licensed professional engineer at the state of Missouri and is employed as a transportation project manager at Central District Office of the Missouri Department of Transportation, known as MoDOT, in Jefferson City. He has served in several design division positions at MoDOT since 1996 and was Central District ADA Coordinator from 2007 through 2019. His experience in transportation design includes highway, bicycle, and pedestrian facility design. James earned a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Missouri in 2002 and a Bachelor of Science degree in Drafting and Design Technology from Missouri State in 1996. Please welcome James Beatty.
Difficulties at the moment. So Todd, can we introduce the next speaker and maybe we can see if we can get James back up online at the end?
Absolutely. Our next presentation will be from Tom Nickel and Jim Pappas from the Delaware Department of Transportation. Tom Nickel, prior to working with DelDOT, Tom worked as a real estate appraiser and valuation consultant from 1987 to 2001. Tom holds a State of Delaware Certified Residential Real Property Appraiser license and is one of the first 15 licensed appraisers and the state to hold this license. Tom has been qualified as an appraiser expert witness in Delaware Family Court and Delaware Supreme Court. Tom started with DelDOT in February of 2001 in the right-of-way section as a staff appraiser / review appraiser with job responsibilities including appraisal reviews, project right-of-way cost estimates, and appraisal valuations for right-of-way acquisition and excess land property disposals. In 2007, Tom was promoted to a district acquisition and relocation manager. From 2007 to 2015, Tom was responsible for managing acquisition and relocation activities for some of the largest projects in Delaware, including the SR1 and I-95 interchange and the US 301 project. During this time, Tom also served as an interim chief of real estate responsible for statewide right-of-way services. In 2015, Tom transferred to a new program, Pedestrian Access Routes, PAR. This new program assists DelDOT with ADA transition plan obligations. From 2015 to 2020, Tom's experience with ADA project management and project delivery successfully grew the PAR program with a 100% funding increase for project and program needs. Tom has also collaborated across DelDOT divisions and has been instrumental in developing innovative processes to better streamline project delivery through the PAR program. James Pappas, Deputy Director of Operations and Support with DelDOT. Jim received a Bachelor of Civil Engineering from the University of Delaware and Master's in Business Administration with a concentration in Environmental Sustainability from Wilmington University. He has worked for Delaware Department of Transportation for almost 29 years. A majority of his time was in pavement and materials engineering, as Assistant Director of Performance Management, and currently as Deputy Director of Operations and Support. Please welcome Tom and Jim.
Thank you, Todd. Good afternoon and good morning. First, to give a little bit of background about the Department of Transportation and where we stand with the self-assessment and transition plan. As everybody knows, in 1990, there was a requirement to have an ADA self-assessment transition plan. In 2010, DelDOT identified the need for an ADA Title II coordinator to spearhead efforts for the self-assessment transition plan. And in 2012, DelDOT completed an inventory of the physical items within the public right-of-way that consisted of approximately 14,000 lane miles of highway throughout the state of Delaware. DelDOT's self-assessment inventory translated into an application that was web-based to show the identification and location of each facility, which was collected through GPS on the ground collection and also use of video logs. The information was compiled into the self-assessment and is presented on a mapped application. In 2016, approximately, the Department of Transportation revisited the self-assessment and transition plan for approval or concurrence through Federal Highway Administration. And this is where the department refined data to identify what was DelDOT responsibility versus municipal responsibility. The original collection looked at the entire network throughout the state, and it included state-maintained streets in 57 incorporated municipalities. In doing so, DelDOT removed a number of facilities that were part of municipal programs and not part of the DelDOT program. DelDOT at the same time also looked at what had been collected since the original inventory and started modifying the data set to show a more accurate picture of what the current inventory was and the compliance. The image in this slide is just a snapshot of what is included in DelDOT's inventory. It's a very small image. There are of roadways that are part of DelDOT's responsibility, and the color coding shows what is non-compliant versus compliant. So as part of the processes that DelDOT was looking at to address the self-assessment and transition plan goals and objectives, the department took a programmatic approach and created the Pedestrian Accessibility Routes Program in 2014. This program was meant to coordinate with other DelDOT programs, of which there are approximately 17 different types that could be constructing within the state right-of-way or as part of the public network under DelDOT jurisdiction. So the PAR program was meant and intended to assist with the goals and objectives in the self-assessment and transition plan, to develop either isolated project location-driven projects, which could be or linear type of projects, and also coordinating with a number of other activities within the department. The PAR program has the responsibility to assist with the conversion of non-compliance to compliance of approximately 230 miles of sidewalks, 5,260 curb ramps, 6,000 median and channelized items, 1,350 pedestrian signals, and other features including bus stops, driveway crossings, and with a compliancy rate of approximately 50% at the time of inspection. The PAR program, as I stated, has to work, is coordinating and working with a number of other DelDOT programs in an attempt to leverage the most impact, aiding with transition plan goals and objectives. PAR program has dedicated funding. Initially started out with a $3 million funding approximately 5 years ago, and the funding will grow to $6 million annually in fiscal year 2024. The PAR program has been looking at linear projects to address corridor needs, and the reason the PAR program is looking at these is DelDOT generally does not have a program specifically driven to pedestrian projects. The PAR program is also supporting ADA complaints that come through the Office of Civil Rights, and currently is developing open-end construction projects for isolated locations rather than looking at linear or corridor-wide projects. Another part of the programmatic approach the department has taken included the implementation of what is called the Pedestrian Accessibility Standards, or PASS manual, for facilities in the public right-of-way. The department implemented this document in 2018 as a single document to harmonize both ADAG, PROAG, and other best practice guidance. The document is used for design purposes, construction purposes, maintenance purposes, for facilities that are within the DelDOT right-of-way under DelDOT jurisdiction. As part of the development of this manual, the department looked at how to categorize project types, whether it be new construction, reconstruction, what's called a 3R, or restoration, resurfacing, rehabilitation project, or maintenance project. It's critical to look at project types to determine what standards apply to what various project types are being designed and constructed. The intent is to have a desired standard that maximizes accessibility to new construction standards, but also applying flexibilities for different project types, such as 3R projects or maintenance projects. The pedestrian accessibility standards also came up with an approach to what is commonly referred to as a technical infeasibility, but the Department of Transportation has called this a request for practical exception. It's a documented process that explains the existing facilities, the project type, the intent of reconstruction, and the accessibility achieved. So there are a number of things that the department has learned through project implementation and have to be considered in the future. PAR program has to be nimble, and it cannot get stuck in a typical type of project delivery process, such as a design, bid, build. There's also a need to evaluate any other current practice with the DOT and see if there are laws or practices that are acceptable that allow delivery of projects more efficiently and quickly. One of the key things learned is any DOT typically has a process that's a one-size-fits-all. And to be efficient and deliver, the DOT needs to step outside of this process and understand that one size does not fit all for all projects. Something else to consider is funding, state versus federal. State funding generally has some more flexibilities than federal participation, and it allows projects to move more efficiently through an evaluation to design process into construction. And as with any project, there has to be a cohesive team to evaluate and deliver projects through construction. The department has explored several different delivery methods for projects. One is a typical design, bid, build. Design, bid, builds generally have a longer lead time. They have some sort of survey phase, whether it's a traditional survey or a stationary LiDAR survey. And with the survey, there can be interpolation that can lead to problems in the construction activities. These types of projects generally have a lot of information and a lot of detail on plans, and they go through a typical process to get from a concept through to a PS&E and into construction. Other alternatives the department is currently exploring are design build, which seems to have some efficiency built into it if you have the appropriate team members involved. There's indefinite duration, indefinite quantity, and I believe the Federal Highway Administration has just released new regulations on that are subject to comment that would be more beneficial for other project types. And then there is also, lastly, the construction manager general contracting process that pairs up a construction manager with a general contractor to deliver a project into construction and provides input during the design phase. So that would be the end of my part of the presentation, and I will now turn it over to Jim Pappas.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tom. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jim Pappas. So I'm going to talk about an application that we developed to help with our field inspection and how we can share the data once we get that information. So as Tom mentioned, we have our PASS manual, our pedestrian accessibility standards. So those are the regulations that we go by. And so the app that I'm going to reference basically has all of the information from that PASS manual uploaded into that app that our field staff can use. So one of the benefits of being a small state is we have consistent inspections. We have a single team of group of people from our engineering support section that conduct our ADA inspections across the state. All of the projects are inspected again by this team, so we have great consistency with that. And before any project is accepted for maintenance responsibility, inspections take place. And these are not just ADA inspections, but also construction inspections as well. So again, this is done across the state by our team in engineering support. So what is actually inspected when we do the ADA facilities? Any of the curb ramps and pedestrian connections, sidewalks, any of the transit stops, crossing push buttons, and crosswalks. And again, this is just ADA specific, but just for everybody's information, we also again look at the projects overall with the same team of people. So the next several slides will be some snapshots from our ACIA app that has been developed. So the first one that you see here is just kind of, it gives an overall project view of the location that's going to be inspected. Then you can see there's various data that we can provide within the app itself. So this is mostly for the tracking purposes of the app. So you can see here, this is again is a snapshot from within the app. So it'll give all the background information about the location, the type of work that is being done, who the inspector was that went out and did the actual inspection. But on the bottom of this slide, you can also see where there's the ability to add specific information. So if there are any comments that need to be added based upon the field inspection, it can be added here. Any of the documents. So we have a process, and again, Tom mentioned this with our manual. We have a design process that if there is a reason why design standards cannot be met, we can submit what's called a request for practical exception, or an RPE, and that is done in the design phase. And those reviews are reviewed and approved up to our chief engineer. And so that information can be provided. So when our field staff from in the engineering support section go out and do the actual inspection, they will be able to know, oh, the reason why this location was not being able to be built per standards was because an RPE, or a request for practical exception, had been submitted. So that allows, again, just from a paperwork standpoint, that our folks in the field, when they're doing the inspection, know about that information. And one of the most beneficial things, I think, is the images that can be uploaded. So we can upload various pictures of the field conditions. So this gives an example of that. So this, again, is the ability to snap pictures in the field of the situation, and that information can be uploaded just to note that information. And we also do training once a year with our construction and design staff, and we use these as examples for our training purposes to show people both good and bad and challenges that we come across. So being able to upload the photos from the field is very important. And the other thing that this does is it keeps a running file of this information. So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if perhaps we are going to be doing a widening of an intersection, for example, this information has been categorized, and the future designers can go back and take a look at that information and look at the site and see what the conditions are, see if it was compliant, and any geometric issues that they may have. So our team from the engineering support that goes out there, again, they collect the information. The next couple slides I'm going to show are some of the Excel spreadsheets that they use. So we use smart levels and tape measures when we're out in the field to take actual measurements to ensure conformance. And again, as we mentioned, everything is based on our past manual. We have kind of color codes for whether things are compliant or not, so that they can really jump out and we can see if there are any issues that need to be addressed. So here's an example, again, and I apologize, it's a rather busy slide, but it's just kind of give you a general idea of what the information is collected. So you can see various letters there to the left-hand side of that slide. So those are the measurements that are taken, and the right-hand side of that slide shows you basically all those measurements. So, and again, this is a device that's used out in the field, so all of our personnel have field devices that are able to measure this information and then input this information immediately right out on the job site. This shows the ability to not only have the graphical view on the left-hand side of that slide, but also what the physical picture looks like on the right-hand side. So again, you can look at the measurements and then also look at the actual field situation and see how everything looks. So in general, just wanted to highlight this app. So we have only been using this for a short time. It's taken us a little bit of time to get this app developed. We have started using it on a limited basis out in the field to kind of run it through its paces to make sure it's going to track everything accordingly the way we want. Like any app, we've had some tweaks that we've had to do, and we will probably continue to have to do some tweaks. But we really feel that the information that's going to be collected is going to be invaluable for the department, and the ability to manage the data through this app we think is going to be very beneficial in the long run. So we're very excited about this, and the team that's worked on developing it have done a great job. So as far as kind of summarizing where DelDOT is and our future activities, so our past manual is being reviewed and updated. It was presented, like Tom said, back in 2018, so we are going through the process right now of updating it. We've gathered a team across the department and also the Federal Highways from here in Delaware to work collaboratively on that update of that manual, so that's ongoing. We want to continue the usage of that ACA app in the field. Again, run it through its paces, work through any of the bugs, and continue that involvement. Data migration is obviously very important, so how can we take this field data and get it to a public-facing information? Because what we ultimately want to do is get this information to the public so that they know that there's traversable sidewalk, shared use paths out there, and where the compliant locations are, and also from our standpoint, like Tom started the presentation of where are the challenges that the department faces, and then where do we need to allocate our resources to address those. And with that, that is the end. All right, great. Thank you, Tom and Jim. Excellent presentation. In the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and move right to James Beatty from MoDOT. So, James, you are up next.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
You can hear me. Fantastic. All right. Well, good afternoon. I'm going to move my slides back here a little bit. Oops, sorry, went too far. There we go. All right, sorry for the audio issues. I don't know what's changed differently, but it's working now, so we'll get to it. Well, good afternoon. Today I'm going to discuss share some experiences with you about Central District's responsibilities for the statewide MoDOT transition plan. As stated in the introduction much earlier in this webinar, I was the ADA coordinator for Central District from 2007 to 2019. At MoDOT, the ADA coordinator is an additional duty performed along with my primary job title. And during my time as the ADA coordinator, my primary job titles have been first as a senior highway designer and then as a transportation project designer. I'm still actively involved with pedestrian facility design in the district and with central office from time to time. As the ADA coordinator, I led the development for documenting the pedestrian facilities inventory in Central District, research the documentation for determination of ownership, tracked pedestrian facilities improvements for Central District, and I still maintain the Central District inventory map. This aerial map that you see shows Central District's initial inventory locations. The dashed lines on the map outline the district's boundary. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but if you can, there's kind of a white and purple, if you can see the colors around the map that shows Central District as it is today. Of the 18 counties in Central District today, 62 cities and towns were identified in 2006 as having MoDOT owned or responsibility of pedestrian facilities along state routes. Some cities and towns have more than one state route running through them as well. The original inventory had several errors in it. There were several pedestrian facilities in the inventory that were not MoDOT owned nor MoDOT responsibility. Some pedestrian facilities owned or responsible for by MoDOT were not initially included in the inventory, and there have been new facilities added since the initial inventory was completed. So a thorough evaluation of the initial inventory of pedestrian facilities along MoDOT Central District routes was accomplished by reviewing deeds, city plats, and maintenance agreements. We are now going through a process of removing those locations, cities, and towns that we have determined are not on MoDOT right-of-way or are not MoDOT responsibility, and other locations that have been found to be MoDOT owned or our responsibility have been added or modified as needed. To date, there are 76 cities and towns in Central District that have MoDOT pedestrian facilities located within the district. And did I get what I did? I got way ahead of myself here. Hold on a sec. Sorry. Oh, I'm missing some slides, I think. Let's see. Number 5. Okay, here we go. The reevaluation was made by design employees for initially, and for any locations that can be verified by deeds or maintenance agreements, those locations stayed in the inventory. For any locations found that were not on the inventory and were verified by deeds and or maintenance agreements, they were added to the inventory. For any locations found to be removed from the initial inventory, and additional review of deeds, city plats, and or maintenance agreements by district right-of-way employees was conducted. If they agreed with the facility was not MoDOT responsibility, Central's office right-of-way was notified for final determination via a right-of-way determination letter along with supporting documents. Today, MoDOT Engineering Policy Guide, Category 236.4.4, the title Services and Responsibility provides MoDOT's guidance for determining ownership and or responsibility. MoDOT's engineering policy in Category 642 is MoDOT's policy on pedestrian facilities. Our design criteria policy is in accordance with federal standards set by the U.S. Department of Justice based on recommendations of the U.S. Access Board. However, there are a few guidelines MoDOT uses that are a little different but exceed the minimum requirements. One example is in terms of sidewalk width. A sidewalk located at least 2 feet from a curb should be a minimum of 5 feet, and a sidewalk within 2 feet of a curb will be placed adjacent to the curb and be a minimum of 6 feet wide. For a sidewalk less than 5 feet wide, 4 feet minimum being the accessible width, a 5x5 passing space is to be provided at intervals no greater than 200 feet. So that's a little different in the sense that we want a 5-foot sidewalk in most places, or 6 foot if it's against the back of curb, as opposed to putting 4-foot wide minimum requirement accessible width everywhere. Sidewalk design criteria are based on providing access to all pedestrian users to the maximum extent feasible. Section 608 of MoDOT standard plans were developed to provide guidance for the design and construction of various segments of pedestrian facilities along MoDOT routes. On the slide, you'll see there are several standard plans by number that address certain types of pedestrian facility components, such as the paved approaches, concrete sidewalk, and so on. And on the right side are some snapshots taken from some of those standard plans. That top one there is a typical sidewalk with a parkway that's 2 feet or more in width. You would find on our concrete sidewalk standard plan. On the right there is for concrete stairs. The lower left was taken from our concrete median strip standard plan. And the lower right is an example of one of our standard plans from the curb branch, 60850. Let's see. On this slide, these are some challenges and some innovative solutions that we have come up with. MoDOT, the first one here on the left, oops, somebody's switching slides on me. Back up one. Okay, that first one on the far left-hand side is a push-button extension that we used on this existing pole in order to get the push button to be within the 10-inch reach range compliance. The second picture there from the left shows a lowered landing. We lowered the landing down, so it's, instead of being 6 inches above the roadway, it's about 3 inches above the roadway and then ramped down to the road. One of the reasons for doing that was this was a very tight intersection, and we also were able to use the drop-in, or the drainage system there. You can see the drop inlet kind of off to the left of the pole. Also on that first picture there on the left, that is actually the right side of the second picture. But that lowered landing provided access to the road. It also provided there's a ramp on the bottom side of that picture that goes up to an entrance. And in that first picture in the background on the right side, there's a new entrance that we had to install there in order to get the crossflow through the entrance to be 2% maximum crossflow. And so this thing drains very, very, very efficiently during a rainstorm or shortly thereafter. We don't have a lot of sediment building up in it. It worked really, really well for us. The third picture there, in the very lower part of the picture, there's a little concrete outcrop there at the alcove. And that is to provide that 30-inch by 48-inch clear space for a side approach for a pedestrian push button. We needed to put that in so that our push button location, where we put it, the face of the push button, was parallel to the cross slope you see in the background that push button is serving. The final picture here on the right-hand side is a picture of a pedestrian hybrid beacon, high-intensity activated crosswalk or HAWK system that was installed at 2 mid-block crossings across Route 763 on College Avenue in Columbia, Missouri. This was a city project. There is 2 northbound and 2 southbound lanes with a twiddle in the middle, and students were crossing across it to get to campus to go to class. On one side of the street, the east side, the far side of the picture, there's a lot of housing, private housing, and there's some fraternities and sororities on that side. And then, of course, on the left side, the left there of the picture, there was the university, the physics building, and chemistry building, and several others. It's a major access to the campus. And students were constantly crossing wherever they felt like it was. And during peak hours, it became very dangerous. So these 2 HAWK systems were put in, and they are pedestrian activated. So when there are no pedestrians there, they're silent, if you will. There's no lights, and you can travel through them. And then once they're activated, then there's a system of how the lights work in order to warn vehicles to stop and allow pedestrians to cross. There was some education that had to be done both for the pedestrians as well as for vehicles operators to kind of teach them how to go through that. and it was done in several different ways through organizations at the university, some private and governmental organizations within the department as well as in the city, and also through social media. That was accomplished. This next picture, there's what you see there on that little black strip there on that sidewalk is actually a floor drain in the sidewalk that allows sheet flow from a building downspout to drain from one side of the sidewalk to the other and not across the sidewalk. The previous sidewalk that was there, the water just flowed across the top of the sidewalk and it collected sediment. It got kind of moldy at times, and in the wintertime, with the water going across as it got colder, we'd have a sheet of ice there. So the floor drain allows drainage from the sidewalk through a graded cover, and that graded cover is secured to the drain with locking screws, which can be removed. The grade is firm, stable, and slip resistant, and the grade openings meet ADA size compliance requirements, and the grade is removable for easy cleanout. The next picture is a before construction sidewalk. It was an old sidewalk that was in disrepair, and the picture right next to it is one after construction where we rebuilt the sidewalk, we added a curb to help with some of the drainage that was along the street side, and we also connected back to the residents there and kept their little steps that and sidewalk that goes up to their house. The last picture on the right there is a modified private entrance apron to keep the accessible route free of gravel through the entrance. This is a cost savings measure that has proven to be effective. On the far right side along the street there, the situation here is that there are several entrances that were aggregate entrances. So to help keep from having the sidewalk through the entrance to break up or from gravel being drilled up on top of it from tires, those little apron sections on each side, there's enough room there to allow the tires to deposit much of the aggregate that they would bring up on it. So it minimizes the amount of aggregate that gets in the accessible route. And it also keeps the sidewalk from getting broken up due to potholes being developed next to the sidewalk. They're now out on that edge of that apron on either side if they do develop, and it allows the system to last a lot longer. In the future, we can look back at this and we might go ahead and finish the apron connecting to the roadway, but with minimal funding, we were able to do this as an interim solution in order to maximize the use of our accessible routes and keep costs relatively low. In Central District, we are addressing pedestrian facilities issues annually in separate standalone pedestrian facility projects that are aligned with our annual taking care of the system projects. We expect to see better bids for ADA projects that are mostly concrete, and taking care of the system projects, which are mostly asphalt, when they are let separately. In recent years, for projects that were primarily asphalt type projects with some ADA concrete work, bids on concrete work was high enough to cause the project to be pulled from the letting and not awarded, and then we had to do some readjusting of those. So we're pulling some of those projects out, and we're going to let them, those two separately, the roadway and the ADA, and they're both being done in the same year. So we are trying to get the ADA sidewalks done first and then match the roadways to it. We're going to see how that works and go from there. We think that is going to give us some better bid prices on our projects for both the ADA as well as for the taking care of the system projects, those asphalt type projects. We do have several LPA pedestrian facility projects that have been completed with more of them on the way. Right now I for sure have 14, but I'm sure it's more than that. Need to update that a little bit. And we had 14 different LPA locations that got new, that were primarily sidewalk type projects. We have addressed pedestrian facilities in 49 different communities throughout the district to date, and we're moving right along with that. The next of the photos there, they are a picture of a before photo at an intersection in Otterville, Missouri. These two photos are of the same intersection. They're just 180 degrees from each other. But in that first one, you can see there's barriers. There's no connection from the sidewalk to the street on either side. Ironically enough, I took both of these pictures without getting the stop sign or in the pictures. But it is a stop condition here, and therefore the crosswalk needs to be 2% maximum. So we did cut out a section of the roadway, and we put in a concrete apron and crosswalk area so that the sidewalk can continue on through the entrance. And we also repaved the road there also on the street as well as on the city street. Goes off to the northwest there, and also on the main route through town. I did get to talk with two individuals that lived in the city after this project was built, and they love it. They're very, very happy to have it, especially what was there before, when you consider that. Let's see. So as you can see in the picture there, the barriers were eliminated. We also installed detectable warnings as well. The ADA Design Build project that we are going to do this next fall will address the remaining pedestrian facilities from the initial inventory that were later confirmed to be MoDOT facilities during the reevaluation in 2008. When complete, all of the facilities in this project will be accessible to the maximum extent feasible. Most will be fully compliant. The request for qualifications, or RFQ, and the request for proposal of the RFP and award for the project is scheduled to take place in the summer or fall of 2021. The completion date right now is tentatively set for 2023. Pedestrian facilities to be addressed include but are not limited to curb ramps, sidewalks, entrances, including streets, alleys, commercial and private entrances, signals, crosswalks, etc. So we are looking at working on and addressing all of the facility, not just sidewalks or entrances or curb ramps or crosswalks. We are looking to fix the whole system at one time to bring it into full compliance or to the maximum extent feasible. Here recently, 6 towns in MoDOT's Northwest District were added to the Design Build project. They are in Carroll and Sheridan counties, and those 6 cities are located or mentioned here on the slide. And this location is in the borders the northwest corner of Central District at Howard County. And they're within reasonable distance for inclusion for the Design Build project. And MoDOT's Transportation Management System, TMS, which contains an abundance of applications, reports, mapping products, and other information related to MoDOT's transportation system. We are continuing to develop a statewide pedestrian facility inventory database that is in a report and visual map format. We will be completing parts of it in stages as we move forward. It is intended to be used as a district and statewide home for pedestrian facilities data and transportation plan tracking and development tool. And that is the end of my presentation. For any questions? All right, then I will turn it back over to you all.
All right, thank you, James. That was a great presentation. Before we move into questions for our presenters, We are going to do our poll question first. So our next poll question, we can put that up. What type of support would help your agency manage their transition plan implementation efforts? Public outreach information, data management support, performance measurement resources, training. Add topics to the chat, please. Other, add to the chat. All right, thank you. It looks like data management support has the most votes, followed up with performance measurement resources and public outreach information. Thank you. All right, so we have some questions for our presenters for our time remaining. Our first question is for MoDOT. How high were those bids that had to be pulled?
Yeah, those they were more than 5% over. I don't remember exactly how high they were, but they were high. They were more than 5% or maybe more than 10% over the engineer's estimate.
All right, thank you, James. We have another question from MoDOT. What type of data will be in the facility database for each facility? Slopes, widths, etc.
Yes, exactly that. Slopes, widths, whether there's detectable warnings there or not. We'll also probably have, we're looking at trying to get conditions as well, things like any kind of maintenance issues, like grass growing over the sidewalk, to be able to address those as well. Breaking up of concrete. We'll also try to have those located by coordinates, push button heights, type of push button, whether it's APS or not APS, those kinds of things.
All right, thank you, James. All right, we have another question here for DelDOT. Is the ACIA a commercially available app or one DelDOT developed? That was a DelDOT developed app. Okay, thank you, Jim. All right, we have another question for DelDOT. How have the ProWAG criteria been incorporated into Delaware's pass?
The DelDOT pass manual considered ADAG as a base and then incorporated the ProWAG criteria into the pass manual.
All right, thank you, Tom. All right, and this question is for both of you. We have a little bit of time here. What has given you the biggest bang for the buck in transition plan implementation?
I can speak for MoDOT. In Central District. I think the biggest obstacle we needed to overcome was knowing for sure what was our responsibility and what was not, and what we owned and what we did not own.
from Delta's perspective, I would agree with that. It was figuring out what Delta had responsibility to, and then for the best bang for the buck to remedy, it's trying to step outside of a typical project development process and come up with more efficient delivery methods to put more money into the construction activities and not as much into the administrative functions leading to construction.
Okay, thank you, Tom, and thank you, James. All right, thank you all for attending today's webinar. We have reached the end of our scheduled session. However, our speakers will remain online for an additional 15 minutes to answer questions in the chat pod. If you have any remaining questions or feedback, please type them in the chat pod on the left side of your screen. This has been a great discussion. Thank you all for participating. This webinar has been recorded and will be posted in the future. Special thanks to our speakers, Martin Knopp, James Beatty, Tom Nickel, and Jim Pappas, and to our partners at AASHTO, Rene Rico, and the civil rights community. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day.